Welcome back to Cooking Gluten and Dairy Free with Dave D. Today on the menu is steak and twice baked potatoes. Steak and potatoes is one of those meals that we'll just be so satisfied after eating. It's very hearty and very filling. We'll be using my favorite cut of meat, the ribeye, and then using some russet potatoes to make some delicious gluten and dairy free twice baked potatoes. Actually, they should be called once microwaved and once baked since we'll be using a microwave, but we'll get into that in a few minutes. Let's get down to business. Alright, so the very first thing we want to do is to dry brine our steak using salt. So what we're going to do here is start by salting the steak on all sides and then pressing, not rubbing the salt into the steak. So what happens here is a little bit of science, and since I'm a nerd, you're going to have to bear with me. So what happens is a process called osmosis and diffusion. For osmosis, water comes out of the steak onto the surface, and after a few minutes in a process called diffusion, the water comes back into the steak, taking that salt with it. This leads to delicious and tender steak. So now that we're done nerding out, cover the steak in the plastic wrap, put it in the refrigerator for 1 to 12 hours, depending on how much time you have. The longer the better, and then we'll move on to our next step. So after enough time has passed, let's go ahead and remove it from the fridge and allow it to come up to room temperature. This helps with the cooking process. While we're waiting, we can work on our prep. Let's go ahead and thinly slice some green onions. We'll be using these for our potatoes. Next, let's go ahead and smash some garlic for our steak. So we want to smash it enough that the skin cracks but doesn't fall off the garlic. Eventually, we'll be putting this into the oven, and we don't want any burned garlic. And that skin being there kind of protects it from burning. Next, let's grab some fresh rosemary. There's no prep necessary here. Also, grab some fresh thyme. Now let's move on to our potatoes. Potatoes come from the ground, so that means they're naturally covered in dirt. So let's use a scrubbing brush to get rid of that dirt. Give it a scrub all over under running water to remove the dirt like you see me doing here. So once the potatoes are so fresh and so clean, use a fork to poke some holes in it. You probably want to do this about 25 times. This is very important so your potato doesn't explode in the microwave and then you blame me for having to clean up the mess. So now that our potatoes are holier than thou, let's wrap them up in some paper towel so you can quote unquote bake them in the microwave. No real method here, just make sure the potatoes are wrapped in the paper. Now, put your potatoes on a plate and throw them in the microwave for about 15 minutes. So after 15 minutes, give the potatoes a poke with a fork to make sure they're nice and soft. If they're not, return them to the microwave for a few minutes until they're ready. While the potatoes are cooling down, let's go ahead and grate some dairy-free cheese. Today I'm using olive oil Colby Jack cheese, gluten and dairy-free of course, but feel free to use whatever cheese you want. We prefer grating our cheese ourselves because it usually leads to a better melt, which can be tricky with dairy-free cheese. Go ahead and preheat your oven at 375 degrees. So now that our potatoes are cooled, let's go ahead and cut off the top of our potatoes. It should look like this. Next, we're going to use a large spoon to carefully scoop out the potato guts. Scoop out the potato guts and put them in a large bowl. Be careful not to damage the potato skin, as they will serve as a little bowl for the potatoes. Next, add some butter to the potatoes. Next, use a masher or a fork to mix the butter and the potatoes together. Next, let's go ahead and add our green onions. Next, let's add some dairy-free sour cream. Mix it all together with a fork. Now is the perfect time to mention that the exact ingredients and measurements are down below, along with that like button or thumbs up button. Go ahead, show some love. Now we're going to add some dairy-free heavy whipping cream and mix it in. And now this wouldn't be a cooking with Dave D video without seasoning, so season with some garlic powder and onion powder. Next we're going to add about half of our cheese and give it a quick stir. Next, grab a baking sheet and give it a spray with some oil. Place the hollowed potato skins on the baking sheet. Now we're going to use a large spoon to fill the potatoes. So pile it nice and high, like you see me doing here, and they should look a little something like this. Next, we're going to add the remainder of our cheese and then throw it in the oven for about 15 to 20 minutes. Now we can get back to our steak. My hand is blocking the camera because I'm new to this YouTube thing, but I am not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I cook decently, so that's why you're here, right? Anyway, just imagine me covering the steak with an even coat of onion powder, garlic powder, paprika, Italian seasoning, and dried thyme on each side of the steak. Remember to push the seasonings into the meat. don't rub. When we flip our meat to the other side for seasoning, capture the seasoning on the sides of the meat by pressing the meat into the seasoning that fell on the sides, like I'm doing here. Season the second side with the same seasonings. Now, heat a cast iron skillet on medium-high heat until it's smoking hot. Next, add some avocado oil or any high smoke point oil that you want. Now, add your steak to the pan by pressing it down until the surface of the steak comes into contact with the surface of the pan. Sear it for about 1 to 2 minutes until it gets some nice color and a crust forms. Give it a flip and do the same thing on the other side. After the second side is complete, turn the steaks on the sides so they sear as well. Now reduce the heat down to medium-low, and please hit the subscribe button so you can keep making more gluten and dairy-free recipes. After that, add some dairy-free butter to the pan so it melts, and then add the garlic, rosemary, and thyme that we worked on earlier. Tilt the pan to capture that delicious herb-infused butter and use it to baste the steak for about 1 to 2 minutes. When you're done basting, put the veggies on top of the steak and put it in the oven for about 7 minutes. Remember, your oven should already be at 375 degrees from the potatoes, but feel free to turn it up to 400. After 7 minutes, we're going to start checking our temperature to make sure the meat cooks to our preference. I'll leave a chart in the description box below with the temperature and doneness. I prefer medium, but do whatever makes you comfortable. If you're eating well done steak though, I'll say you might as well eat a hamburger. Take your steak out and let it rest for 10 minutes on a plate before cutting into it. And there you have it, folks, some delicious twice baked or loaded potatoes with the most delicious and tender steak you've ever had. Remember to hit that thumbs up button if you liked the video, and subscribe if you're interested in more videos from me. Also hit the comment section down below with some positivity. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.